welcome back to Timeless Topics. In this episode, we discuss everything from the compounding nature of trauma in the NICU to how an individual is shaped by their lived experiences, positive, negative, and neutral, to how our words have power. We wrap up the episode with a bit of a soft launch, so be sure to listen until the end. Tracey had some video issues, but we persevered. We're grateful you're here with us. Let's jump right into the discussion.
Individual trauma, family trauma, on levels that for me, I can't even fathom. But it also spoke to me about, I like the idea of preventing additive trauma in the NICU. There are lots of things that we do that compound an individual's lived experience. It's not a one-off, right? I mean, I really just started diving into it, and I really wondered what you guys' thoughts were. Am I out in left field without a glove? Or am I really peeling back layers that really do speak more deeply to the lived experience of trauma that doesn't just happen on admission, but gets compounded on admission? What do you think?
Yeah. So I think it's admirable, right, to want to prevent it. Prevention is not in our control, though. Not without complete redesign of almost every system that an individual intersects with, right? Because I think any form of intention, and I'm using that word intentionally, to respond to trauma or the potential of trauma will do something to mitigate and buffer, right? It will attempt. Now, our intent isn't always aligned with the impact that it has, though, which is why I chose the word, right? Because we can have good intentions, but the impact might still not land as we think it should. And the thing with trauma, which sometimes makes people shy away from wanting to work with it at all. And I know, Mary, we've talked about this in the past a few times of, well, is everything trauma then? And you're just like, well, yes, right? Like, or at least has the potential to complicate, add a layer, to intersect with something, with someone's trauma, because a person is who they are partially because of what they've lived through, good and bad, right? So we can't ask them to not have impacts of trauma that they had was some kind of a participant in. Now, I would like to believe that, medical systems in the future, or just any system in the future that is aware of trauma and the lasting impacts, could also provide that mitigating factor. But when I teach this concept, I usually will make sure I say all the time, like, it's why we explicitly say trauma-informed care or trauma-responsive care, because you can't actually take the traumatic experience away because of how individualized trauma is experienced.
Yeah.
We think about the SAMHSA definition of it's an event, a series of events, that has an impact that is a different, the effect is different for every individual. And so when you're walking past it, two people can experience something that we globally would consider a traumatic event, but walk away with two totally different effects of it.
Then this goes beyond the NICU. This is your activist work. This is your, just really addressing things systemically, because again, trauma doesn't happen on admission. And if you really want to do this, then you need to get out and speak up. And if you are in a situation where your color is your privilege, then you need to lean into that and leverage that in ways that will really begin to dismantle all of the trauma that's just embedded, overtly and covertly into the systems.
Yeah, or whatever is your privilege, your income, your primary language, your sexual identity, like all the things, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Well, and I think that speaks to what Jessi was saying about trauma being individualized, right? Recognizing that what is traumatic for me is not going to be traumatic for you. And there are some things that have happened from the moment I was born, i.e., our conversations of strong Black female, wimpy white girl, that to some degree have influenced and shaped who someone is as a person, right? And how it, again, admirable. How can you change all of that?
Yeah.
And it goes back to our previous conversation a couple of weeks ago, right? Of the spiciness. You take away everything, you make everybody the same and everybody bland. And what do we have? Right? Not that I think people should be traumatized just to give us differences. However, we know that people's lived experiences, their past exposures to certain things shape who they are, which therefore makes us this beautiful cacophony of individuals with different personalities and different experiences and different thoughts and opinions. And that's what makes this place what it should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like everybody, again, you check your point. We don't need to suffer to matter, right? But often mattering comes from suffering, right? Like the meaning that happens with post-traumatic growth and all of the changes and everything. And so again, it's not like, okay, well, we should hurt everybody, but because I want to make sure that's clear. But I do think that people become who they are because of their lived experiences. And so we have to hold space for what that looks like. And to Mary's point earlier, of, okay, well, what does this look like outside of this one specific lens? Because we're all obsessed with this particular lens, right? It's what we've spent most of our careers all, in and supporting families and babies navigating a traumatic experience, whether it's, birth-related trauma or prematurity or whatever got them into, the NICU. But there's so much more to a person and so much more to the family that walks in, intergenerational trauma and systematic trauma and like everything that shows up with that person, whether they're aware of it or not, all parties included, baby, family, and clinician, right? We're all showing up with our imaginary labels over our heads that we may or may not identify with, believe in, agree with, or be aware of, right?
Yeah.
But it all shows up to where like, well, I don't do something truly heinous, so then I'm a not harmful person, right? Rather than just kind of sitting with that, maybe you are going to hurt somebody's feelings today, whether it was intentional or not. And the opportunity for you is for someone to feel safe enough to say, hey, that didn't land so good. And can I offer you how that felt on this side,
Yeah.
right? So that you could then have a growth potential in that area.
I love that you brought that up, particularly kind of spinning off of what you had said earlier about the suffering piece, like the me that's showing up to you guys right now isn't all, rainbows and unicorns. I mean, it's, there's a story that's, spotted, a lot with challenges and struggles and I'm not unique to this. I mean, this is part of the human experience. And so is what we're really trying to create or intend or guide how we show up more about what you just recently said, right? More about having the courage, the open-heartedness, the the courageous vulnerability to lean in. Because when I hurt you, whether you say it or not, I most of the time know that I've hurt you. It's my choice internally to decide if I'm going to own that or if I'm going to pretend that that didn't happen. And that takes a unique skill set. And I think, again, kind of pivoting off of the wisdom that you guys just shared, this isn't about trying to, create a nirvana. I mean, that's just, silly because I think, I don't know, the more I've navigated challenges and triumphs, the more I discover that the beauty in my lived experience, at least, is in navigating those experiences, in challenging myself to be a better expression of myself, sometimes bombing on that aspiration, and then coming to grips with it and doing what I think is the right thing. Not that I know what always is the right thing, but putting it out there and hoping that it's received in a way that can help me grow, but my growth, you don't own my growth also. So, like all of these complexities, I think are part of the beauty of the journey. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, sadly, that is, right? That is currently is. It doesn't mean it always has to be that way, but just currently how people are navigating life is. But there's also these additional layers that I do have agency over, that I can control, that I can show up to you respectfully, lovingly, compassionately in the moments that are unfolding, instead of just like broad brushing. What does that look like in the micro moments that unfold in everyone's lives, right? The clinicians, the babies, the families. And I just noticed I said that in a way that might be inferred as hierarchical, but that was, again, not my intention. But being open to my own frailties and foibles, that I ain't got this down pat. But it feels like maybe it's about, I'm going to walk alongside you. I get it that this sucks. I'm here because I get a paycheck at the end of the day or at the end of the week or whatever. But this was never on your radar. And so the best way I can lean into this and prevent any maybe compounded trauma, I'm not really sure what the language is here, but I think what I'm curious about is kind of dissecting how to articulate a vision for this work to say that idea and connect it to like the reality of people. Let's anchor it. Let's hold the string of this balloon. We see what it can be, but we don't see all of the aspects of what it can be. But we're grounded in kind of discovering that together.
I personally think of trauma responsive or just informed work in any way as really more grief work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's being able to say that the answer isn't to prevent loss, because loss is unfortunately a part of existence, right? And I don't mean grief exclusively tied to death. There's all kinds of losses that can happen that end up with a grief response. And the answer also isn't to move someone through their grief. It's to sit with them through their grief.
Yeah.
So that you can hold space for the vastness of that experience and how much it's going to ripple throughout their lives. Because, we would have to prevent preterm birth. We would have to prevent NICU admissions altogether. Like, there's so many things, and we can chip away at this giant problem. But that's where I find a lot of clinicians especially have a hard time with embracing the magnitude of the problem. They'd rather drill it down to this because I could write a paper about this, I could do a study about this, and I could fix this part. And in some ways, sure, you can make, moves in this way, and then we could build on that, and then eventually we can get somewhere, right? But when we oversimplify some of the experience, it actually is a re-traumatizing, experience for the individual, because then now you're kind of dismissing the other aspects of it, like the big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's really hard for us as clinicians to not drill down to the top two variables, right? Because that's how our brains think. We think if I do this, then this will change. And then I have a hypothesis, because then if I change this, then maybe this will change. And we want to study it. And I love it for us, but also you got to embrace the ambiguity of it, which we're really bad at. As people. And in some ways it's good that we're bad at it, because then we can find the variable when we can fix it. But it's when we're up against something that we can't immediately do something with, it feels very uncomfortable, for us.
I think it's that disconnectedness, that we just experience as part of how we've been acculturated into society, locally and globally. Because I'm also reading this book, and it talks about indigenous wisdom, and that kind of groundedness in connection and interrelation with nature, with everything, but we don't have that, and so we kind of tend to. It feels like we're just always looking through the microscope, and dissecting all these things and just trying to piece together a solution. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think it's one way, one piece of a bigger whole, but sometimes it doesn't even seem like it's connected to a bigger whole. And I think that's the thing that gets us into trouble, that we think if we just address this one aspect, and it's not that that's not a noble cause, but it is connected to something else, And so, kind of building that insight, building that awareness that even being trauma informed isn't the be all and end all. right? I mean, people read stuff about the, you know, in the literature about the ACEs study or about all these different aspects, and, you know, even literature now from the NICU about trauma-informed care. And it's another like, you know, okay, I have this a little more empirical knowledge, but where does it go?
Yeah, it's like and as someone who has a boatload of letters past her name, it's like collecting certifications, right? Where you're just like, well, now I know this, and I have a fancy piece of paper, and I paid a lot of money to show people that I know this, you know? I mean, and again, guilty as charged, right? My thing is forever long and ridiculous, right? I'm a really good test taker is what it is. But you have all this, and sometimes you're like, okay, this is admirable. I can show that I have expertise in this area. And because in a hierarchical system, sometimes you just have to have fancy things to unlock doors, right? But it's really getting into the embracing that perhaps there's more than one way to contribute to this work. And you know, the research, the empirical, like all that is very much, you know, a part of it, but it doesn't have to be the only, you know, kind of tool that we use.
It's this idea of really kind of figuring out what are the words, because I mean, I do actually, I was thinking of this earlier. I remember having this conversation with Heidi Alls one time, and I had said something like, I wasn't trying to be haughty or anything. I was just like, I said something to the effect about words, you know, like I really like to be cautious about the words I choose, because you know that words have power, you know, and sometimes, you know, you say these words and it can convey different aspects or facets of a phenomenon, right? And so she actually turned back to me. She said, "Oh, really?" And she called me out. God bless her. I freaking love that woman. She said, well, what about the word positioning then? Because you keep using this word positioning, and I hadn't even noticed, right? That I still have words in my lexicon that dehumanize, that do you know what I mean? And I think kind of she really, and she says it in such a way that is so, you know, gentle and respectful. Do you know what I mean? Like, she wasn't trying to embarrass me. She was calling me out respectfully about, if words are so important to you, then maybe, you know, you rewind the tape. And so I have been really more attentive to that, and particularly in the conversations that we have, you know, and I'm learning new insights, and the conversations I've had with Mia and other folks that we've had the privilege of inviting on this. I really try to rewind and go, what does that word really mean? Like, to the point where I get super weird and I like start looking it up in the dictionaries and like really kind of stripping it down, because I want to make sure, and I haven't nailed it, and I'm pretty sure this will be for the rest of my life. But you know, just being mindful. So what is it that you will build? You know, it's not just managing pain, you know, although that is really important. It's not just ensuring that parents are present, although yes, that's very important. But it's all of the other things that, I'll be honest with you, right now in this moment on this call, feel too numerous to count.
Well, I was going to say, like, it's kind of like a common theme we come back to is like the nuance that's needed in talking about this, because when you can't oversimplify it, because it ripples out into so many different areas. So being comfortable with the idea that, well, this is what I think it is, and this is how I'm hopefully going to contribute to the global body of knowledge, and like, you know, to help decrease the lasting impacts of, but I'm also holding space and being very much aware that there's a lot of things that I don't have a lot of influence over, a lot of things we don't even know yet that can, you know, can impact all of those things, right? Because there's so much more to a person than, you know, like you said, like than just pain management or just how they're, you know, comfortably put in a bed, right? Because I try to be intentional, like you said, about the words positioning, handling. I really don't like the term weaker when we're talking about somebody. Like, I always say, like, this person who was born at, or a 24-week person. And it's a whole other layer of, you know, discussion that is individualized to the community, right? Because their person first language is typically spoken as the way we should, because you see the person before the diagnosis, right? But there are some communities who very strongly do not identify with person first language. Like the autistic community very much prefers to be referred to as an autistic individual because they see it as a core part of their identity.
Yeah.
They don't like person with diagnosis of autism.
Yeah.
Not everybody, of course, but there's a big arm there. So then even that is like, we got to be open for someone going, that's not me. This is how I prefer. Cool. Let's pivot real time. Got you. Right. Because I can't be expected to be an expert in everybody's experience. All I can do is reflect back with kindness and empathy when someone's brave enough to tell me that.
Yeah. Well, that therein lies the invitation for humility, right? Cultural humility, intellectual humility, all of the different ways that this is broad brushing, but in my experience, have not been generally trained to be humble, to show up with humility, whether it's, even like think about cultural competence. I mean, how freaking cocky is that? And I just thought, like, okay, I've got to be competent in all the different cultures. And then, you start like going down the list of everybody's label and trying to figure out, like, what do I need to know about all of these different people, instead of just being humble and going, you know what? Welcome to this space. I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. How can I support you and your family as you navigate? Instead of like putting a sticker on somebody, you know what I mean? Like, and then I have to show up for you. How about we just put the stickers down and we just sit down and foster, that whole idea of relational stewardship. I'm me, you're you. I want to get to know you so I can help in any way that I can. Do you know what I mean? And kind of shift from that fix it, treat it mentality to, I don't know, almost like a co-creation kind of a thing, I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, like, because I just like the word health came in behind me and I was like, I mean, can I co-create your health with you? I don't know. I hadn't never thought about that expression, but there are things that I think are important that may be completely irrelevant for you. And so, right? I mean, and that takes a little bit of humility and even vulnerability, right? I mean, in the way that we get reared and trained in this world, to meet you where you are.
Tracey, I feel like we've been blabbering.
I
Do you
know.
have anything?
Bless you.
No, you guys, this is your area. This is where you both are so strong. And this is one of those aspects of circle time when I'm just sucking it all in, right? And but I think this is another way to kind of role model that it's not always about talking, right? Sometimes it's just about sitting back and saying, huh, hadn't thought of it that way. Huh, that makes total sense. And then figuring out how you are then taking the information that is being conveyed from your colleagues, peers, friends, and how that's going to help you with your growth and your pathway, right? So that's where I'm at today. You guys are rocking it. And I'm just like, huh. Okay, because sometimes you do just have to sit back and be insightful about where you are in your path, right? And I don't think we do that well enough sometimes because everybody feels like they have to talk.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm good. I'm good because I would much rather sit back and say, let me figure out how I can take this information and be better versus, oh, let me sit here and think about what I can think of to say so that I'm actually a part of this and I'm actually looking important too. And then in the meantime, I didn't hear anything that you said, right? So we need to go back to this aspect of actually listening to what people are saying and not just pretending like we're listening.
It's like, oh God, I'm going to get the phrase wrong, but instead of listening to respond, it's like actively listening, right? To like have a conversation. Somebody else says that way better than I did. But it's like, because often we will just reflexively be like, oh, my turn's coming. What am I going to say? Even if you're not like explicitly thinking that, you feel this need to contribute, right? Like, I don't want to be the weirdo that just sits there. But then also realizing that, but that actually in itself is a form of humility of being like, well, perhaps I do have something that I could sit with. And sometimes it's not even with people you 100% agree with. Like we have a good thing going here during circle time, but sometimes I'll listen and be like, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not quite ready to respond yet. So I'm just going to sit with these thoughts from XYZ person, right? And then either, as we say in the South, the spirit will move me and I will speak, or I won't, right? But either way, I'm like kind of reflecting back what that person was sharing and then deciding, is there anything in there for me? Or when I approach this the next time, do I have maybe a counterpoint or some other discussion point that I could pivot, right? Rather than feeling like you got to just yell into the wind just to do it.
Well, I think that goes back to our whole original intent, right? When we talk about cultural competence, when we talk about implicit bias, when we talk about meeting people for who they are, if we don't take the time to listen, then we'll never be able to do that, right? Because sometimes it is those what you don't think are impactful conversations where the biggest nugget of truth or knowledge or whatever will be dropped. And like, I see where you're coming from on that. But if you're not actively listening, you're going to miss that.
Yeah. That, to be honest, I think that is the gift of these conversations, these gatherings. I mean, they've expanded my understanding and insight, exponentially. And the way that it goes down too, even though this is being recorded and stuff, and I know other people are going to listen to this in this space that we're sharing right now. It's such a gift, like that sense of safety and sense of respect that that just is ever pervasive. Because I do stress out with pregnant pauses. I it's just always been a challenge, and I am aware of it, and so I do try and like stress test myself a little bit, like, okay, there's a pause. But you're not gonna say, I don't do it so dramatically, but inside my head, it's like, say something, say something. But I love that you gave voice to that, Tracey, so eloquently. Really just kind of taking it in. And I think we all have taken turns with that.
Yeah, I was sharing with you guys earlier that, sometimes it gets heavy. Like it's a lot of work to make this, right? And to edit and social media and all the things on top of my 84 other jobs and all my kids. And it can get heavy sometimes. And then there are moments where I'm like, okay, maybe we pause. Maybe we say like, okay, Jessi needs a break. Like we gotta stop. But then we'll have a good session. And I'm like, well, selfishly, I would like to continue to have these conversations. But then also somebody will reach out and they'll be like, this is important and thank you for doing it. And you're like, okay, maybe I can keep going, right? And it's being able to kind of be vulnerable in the sense of, speaking truth to the fact that it is labor, right? It is work. But also the flip side to that is, but it's worthy work, I think, for the three of us, but also for anybody who intersects with it. I'd like to think we haven't gotten any messages that are like, this is terrible and I hate it. But we want to just maybe kind of throw it out there as like a soft launch of if we start, adjusting schedules or something like that, as I'm like listening to the words of my therapist in my head about doing too much, right? Give us some grace. We're here, we're around, we're doing the things. It just might be at a slightly different pace while I kind of adjust what becoming a full-time video editor did. They don't teach you that in nursing school, guys, or in education school. They don't teach you those things. I've had to learn it on the fly.
Well, I think we have to practice what we preach, right? And what we originally came into this talking about was making sure that you are taking care of yourself, protecting yourself, right? And yet here we are pouring out everything that we have without sometimes making sure that our cups are still okay too, right? And so I totally 100%, 1000% agree with you that this is worthwhile. And I am thrilled that we started it, that we have kept it going. And I think all three of us are people that if you ask and it is something this worthwhile, we're not going to say no, right? And then we find ourselves saying, okay, 6 things I
Yeah.
said yes to, right? And 5 of those 6 are due all at the exact same time. But okay, they are all so important. And when you realize that in some aspects of neonatology, there are not very many people who represent certain things. So therefore, that handful of people, i.e., Mary Coughlin, always get called upon to do the trauma-informed care talks because there are not very many people in that space.
The mission is to grow the crops, grow the people, empower folks to lean in and share their wisdom. And I do love what you just pointed out, Tracey, because kind of the flurry of text messages, in trying to coordinate this because we are so committed to the work that we do, to the conversations that touch hearts, that touch lives in really great ways. Here we are on a weekend. I'm getting ready to travel. We're grabbing Trace in between, working and doing the noble stuff. And even Jess, like trying to have some downtime with her family. But we are committed to this work and committed to, planting seeds around points of discussion that are important to consider, whether you're a clinician, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a parent. These conversations touch lives in meaningful ways, and it's a privilege, and a blessing, to be able to have these conversations in ways that feel safe and that also, when we get that feedback, Jessi, like you were talking about, that other people are kind of like also wanting to hear more, also on the edge, does kind of like, compel you in a good way, right? In a passion way we're going to make time for this. We're going to make this happen because this is important work. And we need to poke more folks, right? To get curious, to get courageous, and to lean in to the spicy stuff that we love to talk about on the regular.
Doing this because it's a work of our hearts, right? And a gift that I think the three of us have to be able to do this and be courageous enough to share it. But
Yeah,
pivots are needed sometimes, right? Just to sustain the work that not everybody, you can't run the race by yourself kind of mentality.
so true.
Timeless Topics is Jessi Barnes, Tracey Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jessi Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.